What is up, everybody? It's Dr. Vibe here, host and producer of the award-winning Dr. Vibe Show, the home of Epic Conversations, and I'm the host of Epic Conversations, 2020 Best Podcast News Award winner and 2018 Innovation Award winner given out by the Canadian Ethnic Media Association. And I host the only online show in the world for fathers and dads that's sponsored by Dove Men Care. It is also co-sponsored by Dad Central, Canada's national fatherhood organization. And I am the board chair of the Global Food and Drink Initiative, which is a multimedia not-for-profit that showcases Blacks in the diaspora that are doing their thing in food, drink, and travel. And as always, I like to say you're blessed, highly favored, a magnet for miracles, and a solution for someone's problem. Broadcasting live August 22nd in the afternoon, a little bit after 5 p.m. Eastern Time. Most times on Sunday afternoon around this time, we're doing Black Canada Talking, where we provide an opportunity for Black Canadians to give their takes on stories and POVs of interest to them, or we showcase Black Canadians. And we're doing today our bi-weekly panel in regards to thoughts about what's going on inside and, well, today it's all inside this country, because there's enough going on inside this country that Black Canadians should be paying attention to. But before we get to our epic conversation, let's say hello to our panelists today. First up, we have Elle Jones.
Hey, there you are.
Hi, Elle Jones.
I remembered to come off mute at the last minute.
How are you?
I'm good. I'm really tired. This is me after no sleep in 4 days. But so much like happened in Toronto, the police came in and attacked people living in shelters, like short-term shelters that were built. And people got pepper sprayed. They pepper sprayed children. Like they did this on the main street in Halifax, like right downtown. So we've been defending the shelters in the neighborhood I live in ever since. So 24/7, making sure they can't come in and destroy people's homes. And we've made a really beautiful community space. Everyone's bringing food. People get kids are there playing, and we're just making sure that people don't lose their homes, and also trying to build just like a space where we as a community can come together with our houseless neighbors and defend each other. So we've been doing like workshops, we've been doing all kinds of stuff. So,
wow.
We organize a space, so it's good.
Yeah. When are you planning to get some sleep?
Well, I have to do overnight tonight, but then we have a storm coming in tomorrow. So
yes,
we're dialing down, like we're not going to be having events. So I shouldn't say this online. If the cops are looking, we're going to have 1,000 people in the park tomorrow.
Okay.
We're still going to be watching, but it'll be a bit less intense. So we'll get a time for some rest maybe. Yeah.
Well, for you and everyone involved, please keep safe.
Yeah, no, not trying to get arrested. That's for sure. Of course, racialized people already got arrested. Black people got arrested. 24 arrests, which I think is the most arrests at a protest since the Atlantica protest in 2007. And that's actually relevant because it's going to lead into our conversation about the election and what I think is a conservative backlash. So just like right before Obama got elected, we saw, this huge, like we were getting all these like violent attacks on protests. We're sort of seeing that building again, and maybe that signals something. And we'll talk about that as we move into the discussion today. So, yeah.
Fantastic. Thanks for taking the time to be here as always. Next up, we've got Sarah Onyango from the nation's capital, Ottawa. Welcome, Sarah. How are you?
And greetings from Ottawa, Gatineau. We are full on, election fever. Because as you know, our Ottawa, Gatineau is, the seat of the federal government. And I also work for a media organization. And for all news organizations, an election is like, the Super Bowl. It's the Super Bowl of TV, basically. So, yeah, lots of interesting things going on. And we're going to be talking about the unprecedented number of Black candidates running across the country, but mostly in Ontario and Quebec. And there's a very interesting race that's shaping up in my riding of Hull Elmer. We'll talk about that as well. And I'm also going to talk a bit about that big controversy over in Montreal. There's a very well-known, highly respected activist there who's, his campaign is not starting off very well. So anyway, that's that. Other than that, I'm fine. I'm ready to go. Ready to discuss.
All right. And a special guest joining us today, Mr. Robert Small of the Legacy Post. Terry, I had him on a few weeks ago, and he said, you got to find a way of having me on more often.
Yeah.
So,
I did not say that.
yes, you did. Yes,
I did
you
not
did.
say that.
You did. Okay, I'm gonna get receipts. I'm gonna send you the clip.
Yeah.
You're using terms that the young guns are doing now.
Yeah. Receipts.
Well, receipts.
Yeah.
Just say that you're going to play the video guy.
Yeah.
Well, welcome. And Warren. Hey, Warren Clarke is in the
Hey.
house.
Yeah.
What is up?
Yes.
It's like a family reunion day. I'm
Yes,
loving it.
is.
You know, this is good stuff. So, Robert, welcome. Robert of the Legacy Post. And Warren Clarke, how are you, sir?
I'm well. Thanks for asking. Thanks for having me. Sorry I didn't respond to the messages.
Okay. You got a lot. I know you got a lot going on, so we're happy to have you.
It was good to see you the other day, though. Always a pleasure.
Thank you. We have to talk about that because that was really impactful. Warren had a great event here in the GTA in regards to men, fatherhood especially, and had two gentlemen dropping serious knowledge bombs about fatherhood and their impact. And hopefully some of it will get out for the general public to see in a replay. I have some of it, but he has the whole thing, and it was really good. So we got a great group of very smart people here today. So why don't we start off with the big story one of the big stories going on in Canada today, or this until what, September 20th, the federal election and the recent provincial election in Nova Scotia. So who wants to talk about this quiet
I think
topic?
Elle should go first.
I'll start us off on the provincial, and then we can talk about the implications for the federal election. So we just had, obviously, on Tuesday, our provincial election. It was a very short campaign, 30 days. And I guess the big news for Black people is we have a record number of Black MLAs. And remember, this is historic Black Canada, the heart of Black Canada. And 4 MLAs out of, I don't even know how many you have, 50 something now. That's the most we've ever had. So I guess that's a positive. We also had a riding, North Preston, which is, of course, the largest Black community in Canada. And all 3 candidates running were Black. So that's the first time ever. Of course, the PC swept. They have like 33 seats or something like that. Don't trust me on my numbers. They essentially swept the rural areas. The NDP took all of core Halifax, and then the Liberals lost, they were in power, and they lost like a ton of seats. But the PCs don't have a single Black person. So one of the questions is also, what are they going to do for things like Minister of African Nova Scotian Affairs? Are they going to have a white person appointed? And because they don't have any Black people, are they going to appoint somebody from outside the government? Because they're going to need somebody to be there. Are they going to appoint, say, like Archie Beals, who was a Black PC candidate in North Preston? So that's kind of an open question, what's going to happen with that. Or if they're just going to stick it as a subcommittee kind of thing under some kind of white person. So that signals something too, right? And I guess one reason why I think this is an important marker election is the Liberals are ahead 20 points headed into the election. Now, part of this is that we have Ian Rankin is a new young leader, not popular, didn't run a good campaign, tried to run on COVID passports, which nobody wanted, and didn't offer much else. But they were 20 points ahead, and then they lost in a massive sweep. So that, I don't know if that's signifying people's backlash to liberalism, people's tiredness with so-called wokeness, people feeling that Black people are getting stuff. We don't know quite yet. But it does suggest that things are very polarized because, like I said, now basically Halifax city is a huge NDP stronghold and left, and then all the rural areas are conservative, except for like Cape Breton has 1 seat. So we're seeing, I guess, this big split that may tell us something about the coming federal election. Are we going to see that kind of massive polarization, like people moving away from the center, which is what has happened in Nova Scotia, if we want to call the Liberals center, although our Liberals are pretty far right. Then the morning after, when everybody was, had been up all night, it was a really late count because there was a ton of advanced polling. So like at least 3 didn't get the count done. The police moved in and the city moved the police in to take down shelters the very next morning, which was clearly also a calculated move, thinking that media and stuff would be tied. So starting at 6 a.m., they came in and, like I said, raided all the shelters, a huge police operation, like hundreds of cops, full riot gear, pepper spraying people on the main road. This is like the shelters were downtown, like in front of the old library. So like a man like walking his kid just to go to Tim Hortons got pepper spray in the face. She got pepper sprayed, which perhaps also shows people thought they could get away with. Obviously, the Conservative government isn't in charge, so it's not like the premier called it down, but it perhaps suggests a shifting in tone. That people are sort of tired of, they feel like they've been forced into this social justice dialogue, or, you know, the legacy of George Floyd and all these things. So the kind of viciousness with this just happened. And the reaction by city councils, who of course is supposedly nonpartisan, but almost uniformly, including in progressive districts, defended the cops, said the shelters were dirty, have all this stuff about public safety, people were trafficking out of the shelters, and literally just supported this. The police chief refused to apologize for pepper spraying a child in the face, for example, came out very aggressive. There was 24 arrests. A lot of like racialized people getting arrested as well. Huge escalation. So, you know, when the cops moved in and people are surrounding the shelters, they put on riot gear, they took bikes to people's throats, batons, they took off their badges, like what happened in the G20. So like their name tags came off. There was thin blue line patches that were seen and photographed on cops. So I don't know what that perhaps signifies. And this is perhaps moving into the conversation about what's happening in Montreal that Sarah's going to talk about, but potentially also a backlash against, you know, what we've been building to and moving to in terms of talking about police and justice. And then this huge operation the day after Conservative government sweeps in and sort of sets the tone for what we might be expecting and what we could maybe expect in the rest of Canada. Sometimes it seems like the people that aren't online, right, and then go and vote, and they vote super hard against progressive interests. So I guess that's my summary of what happened and what I think is perhaps looming in the federal election. It may not be an easy walk for the Liberals. Even we could end up with a Conservative majority. That's certainly not out of the question if you look at how the voting patterns went in Nova Scotia. So I'll pass to Sarah. I think I've said enough there, and Sarah can pick up on more.
Back. First of all, there are some almost 25,000 new Canadians who are eligible to vote in this election and also in the municipal election that I'm about to talk about. So, you know, and most of those new Canadians are going to tend to be Black. So that's something to watch as well. So basically, we'll start with the municipal. The municipal elections here in Quebec are going to be happening this fall. And in Quebec, we have parties. We have municipal parties, right? So, you know, you have different parties running on different platforms. And the current mayor, her party is Projet Montréal. And so Projet Montréal chose a gentleman by the name of Will Prosper. Will Prosper is a very well-known activist, a filmmaker. When the Black Lives Matter protests were raging everywhere, he was on TV constantly and on the radio, so people will be familiar with him. And people in Montréal Nord, which is overwhelmingly, you know, Black, urban, and low income immigrant, and so on and so forth. He has done a lot of very good work in Montréal Nord. So, you know, it wasn't strange for Valérie Plante, the current mayor, to go and, you know, choose him to run for her party in that particular neighborhood. The only problem is Valérie Plante's rival, Denis Coderre. Denis Coderre used to be a federal minister, by the way, under the Liberal government of Jean Chrétien, I believe. Yeah. And my goodness, he decided to seize on a controversy that dates back 20 some odd years, 22 years or so, where Will Prosper used to be a cop. He worked for the RCMP. It was over in the prairies in Winnipeg, in Manitoba, I believe. And so apparently he consulted the database or something like that, and it was leaked that he was trying to leak information to a gang member about a specific case, etc. I'm not, you know, I don't know all the details, but anyway, it has come back to haunt him. It's being used against him in this campaign. Valérie Plante came out in his defense and said, listen, you know, People deserve a second chance. He did this over 2 decades ago. He recognized, what he did. He apologized for it, and he has more than atoned for it in the years since, through all of um, the advocacy and initiatives that he has done in Montreal Nord. So that's what's going on. And another person who's calling him out is the black guy who's running to be mayor against Valérie Plante, right? Balarama Holness, he's a black guy too, and so he has blasted Will Prosper for aligning himself with this party, Projet Montréal, because he feels that it is blatantly racist and it supports policies that perpetuate the systemic discrimination in the city that Will Prosper is known to call out on a regular basis. So Denis Coderre is saying, look, a guy like that with the gang problem that we have right now in Montreal Nord, especially, he can't be trusted. He doesn't have credibility, and there's an ethics issue. He should resign, blah, blah, etc. So that's what's going on with Will Prosper in the municipal election. In the for the federal election, very, very, very interesting. Like I said earlier, we have a record number of Black candidates who are running in this federal election across the country, but mostly concentrated in Montreal and Ontario. So there's over 40 new candidates, and we've got 6 incumbents. Incumbents. One of them is my MP, who is the chair of the the federal caucus of Black parliamentarians. I can never get the name right for that. But anyway, it's the Black parliamentarians at the federal level. There you go. So he's the chair of that. But one of the candidates running against him is a Black woman running for the Conservative Party. And this woman she's new to politics, but she has worked in government and with government at various levels. She's well traveled. She has an international profile. She's originally from Martinique. Both of them are of Caribbean ancestry. So that's going to be very interesting because a Black conservative candidate running against the star Black liberal candidate in the National Capital Region. And I should also mention that Greg Fergus, my MP, is also, I believe he's in charge of he's the parliamentary secretary to the person in charge of digital government or whatever. And so, see what the Conservatives are trying to do there. Sort of what Elle was sort of mentioning. The thing is, in this region here, I don't see that there's a high likelihood of a conservative sweep of the ridings on the Quebec side here because there's a lot of, the separatist activity. So Bloc Québécois, there's a lot of the social democratic mindset. So it's more likely to be NDP taking seats away from the Liberals. But because, we are the federal capital and many people here are employed by the federal government, we tend to vote Liberal because we want to maintain, the status quo. So that's what's going on over in Quebec. Very interesting, exciting times.
I wanted to.
Go ahead, Elle.
Oh, I just wanted to jump in on the Will Prosper thing, just to add. And I was looking at this story after Sarah tipped me to it, that so all they know is that he accessed the database, and then they're alleging that he did so because he was leaking information to his friends who are in gangs. And there's no evidence of that. All they know is he accessed it. And clearly, of course, this information came from the RCMP. Like, they have leaked it because they're the only ones that know. And he signed confidentiality. So he couldn't reveal it. That's part of the job agreement.
Yeah, they set him up.
now the RCMP has leaked it in order to obviously damage him. And one thing we were saying before we came on the air is that we all know and have heard and like have people tell you directly that, for example, when their white daughters date black men, like their relatives access databases and will be like, oh, I looked up to see if he had like pimping charges or criminal charges. Like this is not new. Like white people do this all the time.
All the time.
And there's no evidence. It was never proven that he gave the information to gang members. Like that is a fabrication. They're just making that up and then using that piece to say, oh, this black man, what they're trying to imply is he's a gang member. And then they're basically saying, and we shouldn't elect him at a time when we're trying to deal with gangs.
And he was exonerated. There's receipts,
You know, and that's
evidence.
faulty reasoning, by the way, because actually previous gang members have a really good record of intervention with current gang members. Like, even if he were a gang member, it's actually really productive for people that were involved in gangs to then go and intervene and stop other young black men from getting involved, you know. So the logic is also stupid. But just to add to that this is clearly an RCMP hit job
set up
on this man. So yeah, I just wanted to add that.
Okay, thank you, ladies. Robert, Warren, thoughts about the election being called? Thoughts about what do you think may happen? What should happen, et cetera, et cetera?
Well, I'll go first. I think that we definitely have to realize where our interests lie. You know, of course, there's going to be blacks in different parties that representing different parties. But also, just because it's a black face doesn't mean they have black interest in there, right? So while it's inspirational to see various black people winning in different for different parties and being involved, you know, we also have to make them, whether they be conservative, liberal, NDP, also rally around the interest of black people. You know, so one party, you know, well, regards to conservative, probably not, but liberal, NDP, and even Green, you know, I like myself, like I can see myself in any of those three parties, really, you know, just because I can be swayed either way, right? So I think it's up to all those three parties and the Conservative Party really to demonstrate that they have black interests involved and make a genuine and a serious attempt to appeal to the black interests and in order to gain their vote. I can keep on talking if the mute
Warren?
Can everyone hear me?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I won't be too long-winded on this topic because my ear has not been to the ground as it usually is on these topics as of late. But I do think one of the things we have to consider from a general perspective is that this election comes at an attempt to purposely and intentionally sway public opinion during a pandemic. I don't think that this is an attempt for the people. I think this is an attempt for serving a party's interest. I'm not going to say which party it is because every time I say a party and then people are like, oh, I think I should vote for them because Warren said, and that's not what's going to happen today. So I think we have to be very mindful of that as Canadians. I also think that, you know, we also have to be considering who this election is for when we talk about from a race perspective. You know, we know anti-black racism thing. This is something we talk about very fluidly on this show. And I also think that we're not going to have the representation of black folk or African descent folk voting in the polls this election. So this is going to sway very much so in a very white dominant, higher socioeconomic class people who have access and are vaccinated. It's gonna encompass all of those tropes. I think we have to be aware of that as Black Canadians. I just wrote down as you were speaking, Sarah, respectfully, I really appreciate what you're saying. You know, at this point, when you said a star black candidate, you know, it just goes to show that, you know, skin folk is not your kinfolk, right? We're all very much so different when it comes to this blackness. I think we should acknowledge that. I'm not saying you didn't, Sarah. I'm not saying, I'm just adding that this facet to what you're mentioning. You know, and you were saying this too. Sorry, I forgot your name. My apologies. First time meeting you there, my friend.
Robert.
Robert, sorry about that. Thanks, Robert. Sorry about that. Nice pictures behind you, by the way. So I think we have to be very mindful, you know, of how who these people represent, who they're representing for. A star black candidate for me may not be a star black candidate for somebody else. I think we can definitely sway public opinion that way in our black community. I think we need to give people opportunity to more understand of how they should vote in our black community, because we're not, as much as we don't show up most of the time, and I say that with the utmost respect because it's a fact. We're not making informed decisions. I think when we hear people like Justin Trudeau, and this is the only thing I'll say a candidate's name, mention that he's petitioning for single parents, particularly mothers. There you go. That's another case where he's petitioning just for for single female-headed households. But we do know there's male-headed households, and they're forgetting that. But let's trouble that even further. How about black female-headed households? Are we considering that as well? And a lot of the times we don't, because a lot of people don't know that this narrative of blackness in Canada enough to actually make an informed decision for self. If you really listen to people who are talking about the intersectionality, which is something that I breathe and live in the work I do. One person I would mention here I go dropping names I said I wasn't going to do, Jagmeet Singh. But yet yesterday, as I was in the gym, and the headline says these are the candidates who are the face of Canada in terms of the Jagmeet Singh, Justin Trudeau, and O'Toole and these candidates. And when I look at the percentile associated to these candidates, the image is for white men. The image is for the Justin Trudeau or the Aaron O'Toole. And you think to yourself, Aaron O'Toole just started, right? So why is he so much more popular, than a Jagmeet Singh who's been running for the last few years? We got to think about this in consideration of how the elite are actually encouraging their offspring or their children to vote and how to vote. We're not even doing that much in our community. So what's a real? I encourage, and I shake the tree purposely. What is a star black candidate? How do we define that? How do we give life to that? How do we encourage our black community to understand the necessity to vote, right? Are we even having these conversations in our household to say, hey, this is a candidate. This is what a candidate is doing. This is politics. This is what politics do. We don't have those conversations, and this is not to blame the black community, but this is something we need to consider. I told myself I wasn't going to talk a lot, and I just did. So I apologize. Here I go.
So can I jump in? When I said star black candidate,
I'm sorry to finish my thought.
Sorry.
I think that's important too, right? And then that's an example of how we create solidarity within our community. If we can't finish thoughts, then how are we going to hear each other? But I'll stop. Go ahead.
No, I didn't realize you were still gonna.
Yeah, I had a rant, but it
No,
stopped.
keep going. Keep going.
Go ahead.
Go ahead, Sarah.
Okay, so when I said star candidate, I said star candidate because that's the way the party looks at it, that's their star black candidate, just like Ahmed Hussein is their star black candidate in the GTA, et cetera, et cetera. He's a minister, he's the first Somali, this. So when I said that, it wasn't, me saying, oh, black people should look at this guy because no, that's not it at all. And Greg Fergus is not running as, oh, I'm the black candidate. That's not how he's running at all in Hull Elmer right here at all. No. But in Quebec, we say, c'est un gars de terrain. The guy is on the ground, on the field, and has always been. So it's not like, out of nowhere and all of a sudden, there he is trying to get elected, etc. I do agree with you about there are not enough conversations about the importance of voting and participating in the democratic process, right? And voting is part of that. Voting is not the only part of it. And that's the thing. It's only when there's an election now that black people want to start talking about participating in no, it's what, like things like what Elle does with advocacy, that's part of participating in democracy. And we should take accountability as a black community. the churches that keep talking about, oh, well, you know, we don't want to get into politics. Excuse me. When you're talking about a woman's right to, you know, women's reproductive rights, and you're wagging your finger, etc., that's politics right there. And you're the people who are going to go and vote for a party that's going to take away that right. So don't talk to me about you don't want to get into politics because you're the church. And that's also forgetting the history of the involvement of the faith community in advancing democracy. Just go across the border and look at, you know, who pushed the civil rights movement forward. So, yes, those conversations need to happen not just during elections, but in between elections. What doesn't help also is that in the schools, civic education is not adequate either, right? That's not adequate either. So, but as a Black community, we need to take accountability. And I'm hoping that the increased number of Black candidates in communities in Alberta, there are a bunch in Alberta, I think I saw one in Manitoba, etc., that's going to awaken some sort of interest, that it's not just about, you know, surviving the day to day. And you know, yes, there's challenges, you work 3 jobs, etc. But while you're deciding not to take part in the process, somebody else is making that decision for you. That's the problem with that. So yes, there are challenges, but I don't know if you heard the announcement by the Chief Electoral Officer of Canada this week. I think it was on Thursday that he came on to explain things are going to be done a little differently this time around because of COVID. Vote by mail is available for people. You know, advanced voting. Unlike in the United States, because we have national standards for elections. So we're not going to get the Texas situation or the Florida situation where they're trying to reduce arbitrarily the number of hours that you have in a day, etc. Here, by law, your employer must give you the time to go and cast your ballot by law. So yes, there needs to be more education in that regard. I agree.
I want to hear Warren's rant, but speaking of Black people in other communities, and I thought of it because of talking about Greg Ferguson, he was out here. So the biggest Somali community outside of Toronto is actually in Edmonton, right? Like Edmonton has a huge Somali community. And I don't know if people have been paying attention to this, but they are completely under attack right now. Understandable in a Kenny run province. Women are getting, they're stopping at stoplights and white men jumping out and like beating Somali women in their cars. A friend of mine was in the store, like talking to her auntie on the phone, and a white man came up to her and said, like, speak English, and started screaming at her in the store. And then she basically like blacked out with rage and fear and like attacked him. And he like ran away because he threatened her. And then the cops watched the video and said that because she responded aggressively, it wasn't a hate crime on his part, even though he attacked her. So Black women being blamed for the hate crimes being committed against them when they defend themselves. There was some Somali woman sitting in the parking lot of the mall, and white men came up and started beating on them. And these young Somali teens jumped in and got like the hell kicked out of them because they were only like 14, 15, but like trying to go up against these men. Like they're getting hijabs ripped off. And like it's even spreading to other communities. So like people that are picking up on this, and like now people from other racialized communities like beating them and calling them N-words and stuff like that. And they haven't been able to get anybody to listen or pay attention. The police won't lay charges. So like the woman that got beat at the stoplight, the cops like, we just can't see the plate. And I'm like, don't you have cameras in the stoplights? Like you sure have cameras when people are speeding through. But now when white men are jumping out and ripping hijabs and beating women, and then they won't even accept, like they can't understand that they're Muslim and Black, like. And then the Muslim organizations are very much run by like Arab men, like brown men. So we need to talk about this, right? That, you know, there's a ton of anti-Black racism that's also going on with the Muslim community isn't standing up because they're Black. And so they're like, we're Black, we're women, and we're Somali, and Muslim, and hijabis, you know, and like all of that, and immigrants, and all of that's like coming together and just creating this complete storm where they're like completely terrorized. And I thought of it because Greg Ferguson was actually out there. And they actually were like calling me to be like, what's he like? Like, what should we do? Should we like work with him or not? You know? And also trying to figure out if this is an election thing. So I just wanted to also just talk about that. Like, this is the climate, and that's Alberta, of course, where in the West, the Liberals totally got swept out, and it's like fully conservative, and that's what they're getting back. So I just wanted to add that. But Warren, I want to hear your rant.
You're on mute.
You're on mute. Unmute yourself.
So much rant in my head. I don't know which direction I can go, because I didn't anticipate being cut off. But respectfully saying, right, like, it just goes to show that a lot of things that we know about our Black community, we just don't know, or we take for granted. I'm going to sum this up really quickly. By no way, no how am I going to get any argumentation with any of my colleagues here today. But if we can't have challenging conversations where we know that we're not coming at each other to put anybody on the spot, we're coming here to create critical thinking, then I don't know what we're doing. But my aim here is to challenge us, to even challenge me, if we're going to have a Black Canada talk. And when I say to you folks that when we talk about things such as Star Black Candidate, that's propaganda, because when we talk about our marginalized communities, they don't know nothing about these candidates. They know nothing. You know what I mean? And we're just perpetuating the same language that has been given to us by these white settler colonizers. Like, we need to find a language, and that's one of the things that I encourage us to do here, is find a language of how we can educate our people and let them understand what's at stake here. Because we're going to have many moments where, example, Elle just mentioned it, we have an intersection of Black woman and a hijab, right? That's 3 different social oppressions that person is facing: gender biases or sexism, anti-Black racism, and religious discrimination, which some of us don't even take for consideration. So I think there's deeper things at stake here than just saying things that perpetuates a narrative that doesn't even belong to our language, because we don't have a language to actually discuss our social oppression that we experience in this country. So I'm going to stop right there.
How, for each of you, how critical is this election for Black Canadians? Robert?
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, that's okay. Yeah, I think that it's every election's critical for different reasons. I think in every 4-year interval, there's different things that are of importance to the Black community. When Sarah had mentioned the Black Star candidate, how she mentioned that is that just merely that I view a star candidate, right, in the Black community as someone who has come up through the ranks that the Black community knows, and they have support that person, or the majority of the Black community. But I would agree with what my brother said, is that that there are Black candidates that represent different interests to Black people, and oftentimes, like, the Black politicians represent like a Black middle class agenda, but not the agenda of immigrants and such like that. That is very particular. So yes, we should be wary of these type of terms, but I understood what Sarah was getting at generally, right? But I think that with respect to this election, we definitely have to take part in it, and take part in every election. We can't be, like, I think one of the presenters already mentioned, that we oftentimes are content in being observers and actually think that it's more of a political statement to not be involved. And I guess we'll talk about the Toronto experience, and that is actually more of a statement than actually voting for any party, because you're basically saying that you don't care who rules over you, that you're just letting your future being decided by whoever wins. And unfortunately, I think that's why, the good reason, like Elle started off, like, for us to be wary of who actually wins in these elections, because our fate is linked to their agenda. And if there's a PC agenda and they're predominantly white men and they win, like, there's no reason to consider your interests, if you didn't vote for them, and 2, if you're not like them, right? So we definitely have to realize what our interests are and vote as collectives, because in a capitalist society, we have to you're voting for your interest as a collective, right? So we just really need to be involved.
I mean, I know where Warren was going to. I'm obviously like extremely far left, so there's like no party that's ever going to represent me in the political system that I really want. I was talking to a lot of the guys in prison the other day, and they're sort of trying to decide how much they're going to organize to vote, because obviously they don't want a conservative government. We know what happened under Harper, where Harper stripped out 2-for-1 pre-sentencing. Harper made all these adjustments to parole. Literally, even you couldn't get like birthday cake in prison. By the way, Trudeau never reversed a lot of stuff. He ran on that and then actually didn't, although he's recently addressed some of the minimum sentences for possession. But that's mostly for white people, not for us. But, so they're sort of talking about should they organize a vote? How should they organize a vote? But they also pointed out that you vote in the riding that you were arrested in. And that's to prevent them from banding together, right? So, because of course, if you have these small towns and you have 800 guys in a prison, if they all voted in that riding, not only would they have quite significant political power, because these prisons are in tiny towns, it's like in Renouf, New Brunswick, there's the prison's probably the biggest thing there, and also, of course, it means the candidates don't have to care and don't have to come talk to them and don't have to treat them as people. So, they're having their discussions about organizing, because it is, of course, legal to vote as a prisoner in Canada. But yeah, I think that my position is always that our work has to be sustainable inside and outside of elections. And I think too much of our energy is spent on asking the government for money. And especially as we've been getting money, I've seen a lot of our organizations just turn to literally let's just ask Trudeau, let's just go to the Prime Minister and ask for this money. And we've been getting some money chucked at us. Nothing significant compared to the billions we spend in Afghanistan, making war, or the trillions we spend on this stuff. 300 million or whatever we get at most is nothing. It's a drop in the bucket. So let's not pretend it's significant compared to what they value, what we spend on the prison system every day. So but that isn't necessarily or at all trickling down, right? That why are we seeing no adjustment to the fact that we have so many Black people in prison, so many Black women in shelters, so many Black people, Black youth without jobs? Housing is completely out of reach, not just for people living in poverty and social housing, but for middle class Black people that can't even dream or think about having a house. And we don't have that generational wealth built up where our great grandmother left an RRSP and we have a down payment, right? We don't have this kind of thing because we've been prevented from getting it. So even if we're a doctor or lawyer, that doesn't mean that we still have wealth, because we haven't been able to put it into housing. So I think Warren's point is importantly taken, right? That if our only goal as a people and as a community and as a nation of Black people is to ask the government for things, don't be surprised when the government changes and those things don't exist, because they giveth and they taketh away, as they say about the Lord, right? That whatever money that you're given, if the Conservatives want to come and not follow through that promise, then where's our organizing? We still have to be able to be putting people in homes no matter what. We still have to be organizing no matter what. So whatever we want to do, whatever government's in power, if we're not in our communities on the streets, organizing against our landlords and organizing against our bosses and organizing for our life, then it doesn't really matter who's in power. They will always run roughshod over us, as Robert's saying, right? They don't care about us. Our vote isn't huge. It's getting bigger now, but they'll throw a couple of things, they'll sprinkle some things, but unless there's who is seriously talking about migrant workers? Nobody, because they don't care. No, who's talking about international war when they make war on Black people across the world and causes the refugees that then we don't want to take in? That's never on the platform. So we couldn't even get candidates in the last election to condemn the bill, the anti-hijab bill. Even Jagmeet Singh, who wears a turban, wouldn't condemn a law about brown people's religious expression. So I think, if we get just solely bound up in this question of politics is election, then that's why it's one way to keep us powerless. So whether we vote, whether we don't vote, we have to organize outside of the election time too. And I stand firmly on that. So I think that's an important piece.
I'm going to jump in there because usually I just stay back, but I have to not only agree with what's been said, but I think that's where we need to take our conversations. We can't just side with the narrative where we're just directly, indirectly making comment on people who may or may not represent us, because all we're doing is perpetuating and continue to normalize what the Black Canadian experience really is, which is this lot is for you. It's nothing big, and it'll never get big, right? We need to organize ourselves. We need to understand our social capital within our community. Our social capital within our community is very low. We don't even realize that there's not enough, supports for our Black youth in education. Elle just mentioned, look at the prison systems or the jail systems within this white settler Canadian nation state. There's no support for these Black men specifically. Not saying Black women, no talk for Black women at this point, but look at Black men for specifically. There's no supports when they're coming out of jail and how they're going to reintegrate right into the community. And even if there's support, there were supports I've seen over my lifetime where funding stripped because of a new government that went in. Or because, and this is no shade I'm throwing, but because of this star Black candidate who you thought was going to understand, they just don't understand. Or they're not given to community with a way in which we need to fight for our community. I'm not throwing shade, but I'm pushing the envelope here respectfully, because we're on a platform, the five of us, who can speak on this matter and educate those people who are going to watch this now or later on. Because if we're not going to push these conversations, all we're going to do is commit to perpetuating the same narrative.
Sarah, you want to add? You're on mute.
Oh.
Go ahead. Oh,
Muted myself again. No, not on that. I'm more interested really on in people knowing why they should participate. Yes, the election, but I did speak about in between elections. What are you doing in between? Holding the people you elected accountable for the promises that they made, right? But again, people need to know what they're voting for federally, because I've heard as a community radio person here, and I don't know if you listen to Black on Black, but we have activists on there constantly. We have people try to educate our audience on different activities, different types of advocacy going on behalf of the Black community, and how they can also participate in those advocacy initiatives, etc. But I'm always shocked at how people are going to talk about, oh yeah, the schools, and no, the schools are municipal. They don't even know that federally that's not what you're voting for. So already there, they need to understand. Elle talked about international issues, foreign affairs, the refugee, the plight of our refugee population, immigration, visas, getting visas. How many people in our Black community have not been able to get visas for their family to come here for very important events outside of the pandemic. Even before the pandemic, we were having this issue with the government of Canada. Well, if you didn't know that, in the federal election is where you should be pounding candidates of all colors, not just the Black ones, but whoever the candidate is in your riding, about issues like that. You should also be, beating them over the head about issues like all those undocumented migrants who came across the border to help with the effort in the long-term care homes. Here in Quebec, that is an issue. This should be a very loud election issue. Why has the government not sort of sped up, processing their papers, their documents? Why are so many of them still without status? Also, migrant workers here in Quebec, same issue. I think there was a strike. I believe it was in Quebec. They went on strike because of the working conditions there. These kinds of things, these issues with the migrants are as a result of agreements with other countries. So there again, foreign affairs, So make sure you know what issues are under federal jurisdiction. Defense, Canada's involvement in conflicts around the world. I think Elle mentioned Afghanistan or Middle East, but in Africa as well, in Mali. Canadian soldiers were in Mali. They've been on keeping peacekeeping missions in the Great Lakes region. Okay, that's our tax dollars. We need to have a say. So basically, it's about having a say and making sure that these people understand that, you are here to also protect your interests. Yes, during elections, on election day, and outside of elections. After you've voted them in or not, you're going to beat them over the head with the same issues.
Good stuff. Good stuff. Just want to ask, in regards to the conversation, we did have another conversation topic. I don't know if people can stay a little bit past, or we can just continue that to the top of the hour. But I want to ask then, some of you have mentioned, some of you may not have mentioned, so put yourself in the lives of Black Canadians. When a candidate comes to their door, what should they be asking that candidate? Go ahead, Warren. I want to hear you first on this one. Take yourself off mute, my brother.
Yeah, that's first off. I don't think we should be putting on mute. I don't think we should be putting that pressure or that. Let's put that. I'll just say pressure, for lack of a better word, on the candidates. It's not for them necessarily, but I will entertain that question because you're asking the question.
Sure.
I think what's most important for Black candidates to do is to actually discuss what the agenda of the bigger party is, because some people don't know NDP, they don't know Conservatives, right? And then it's in certain moments, some people are not going to understand, the certain language that connects to these parties. So, for example, Conservatives, they're a highly, capitalist-minded, party, versus the Liberals are more socialism or a socialist party, right? So, breaking that down would definitely take more time, more effort that these candidates don't really have, right? Like, think about this election that's happening right now that Trudeau called. They have 30 days to get their point across, or trying to get their point across. You're only going to be talking to the the middle class and the elite at this point, right? You're not gonna get the vote from the people who we should be helping and understand how to vote. But it goes back to the responsibility of the moments we're in. Like, we are working and practicing and oppressing people every day in this country. That's the norm. We do it like it's like you learn or you don't. And for those who are on the ground doing this work, regardless of how you do it and how you're having the conversation with people, I commend you. Even having a conversation at the bus stop, that's part of it. But our institutions aren't set up to actually help people thrive. Our places of our social places doesn't give access to people, or allow people to feel a sense of accessing services that they should receive, right? Like, this is beyond just a candidate, but in terms of what the candidates can do, I think that starts at the party leader, right? Like Al just mentioned, you have to, if there's a ban on hijabs in a province and you're wearing a hijab, say something, right? Like, don't sit back and just be like, there's nothing for you to say, right? Like, I can sit and watch this, Jamie Slin's TikToks every day, all day, and him dancing around, but yet you're not saying something about, someone who's, probably would need your voice. Like, it's not to say he doesn't, but, there's no specific answer to this, right? And, like, there's many facets we have to consider when we have this type of conversation. Because if we lean too far on the right or the left, then we're going to bring our own biases into that point. So I think we have to be very mindful.
Before we go any further, the reason why I asked the question is, and Warren, I feel you, that we have to provide information, and anything that we can do to help give clarity to our fellow Black Canadians. I respect each one of you more than enough that I know that you can help them, those who need and are wanting to get clarity, to bring that clarity. So that's what I was just asking for. Like, what should they be saying? What should they be asking these candidates? And I hear what you say. It is up the party ladder, but for many of them, that's the only probably exposure or opportunity they may get to ask it. So I didn't want to make it an inconvenient question.
Yeah, just really quickly. But the other thing too, right? Like, sorry, Sarah, just really quickly, is talking a truth that, the community needs to hear, like, many of these candidates, if not all of them, I'm not going to pinpoint anyone, they're not speaking a truth that needs to be discussed. They're only coming in partially saying partial truths that speaks to partial issues, right? Like, that's another issue in itself, right? So I'm going to stop there because I see Sarah's hand.
They come to, okay, so they come to your door, blah, blah, with a glossy brochure. Yes, who are you? First of all, this person is going to represent your riding, okay? Remember that before they get to the House of Commons. So what is their record in your riding? I mean, is this somebody who just came out of nowhere, has no experience in community? You've never seen them in the community, they're not involved. And I'm not, when I say community, I'm not just talking about the Black community. I'm talking about the community in general. You know, like you haven't, you know, you've been out and about, you've never seen them, they came out of the blue. You have to ask them about their record in the community and their experience, and then find out why it is they are running, what they think that they can bring to your riding to make your life better, to make your neighbors' lives better, to make the entire riding's life better. Okay, so after that, then you can ask them, you know, the general questions about, you know, the party platform, etc. But when you're asking them that question, ask them that question based on what is most important to you. What is most important to you? If you're here in the National Capital Region, maybe, you know, you're a public servant, you're interested in, okay, so what's going on with the Phoenix system? Are you people going to fix this if your party gets into power? If you as an MP with constituents who are mostly public servants, are you going to push to get that fixed? Right? If it's a community where you have a lot of, you know, a large newcomer population, for example, and, you know, you're worried about, you know, things like, you know, visas and getting status and that sort of thing, you should ask them about that. Ask them the tough questions about the things that matter most to you, to see, and ask them, yeah, you know, what are you going to do to earn my vote?
Okay, good stuff. I'll go to Robert next.
Yeah, I think I would agree with both what specifically what Sarah was mentioning, but also what Warren has said as well. You know, with regard to what Warren said, picking up on one aspect of the many things that he mentioned, I think that it's important for us to be educated about what our interests are individually as well as a collective. You know, I think that it's important that we can have the individual education, but also talk about the situations of migrant workers, let's say in Ontario, Nova Scotia, and Montreal, the similarities. I'm sure that during COVID, there's many stories going around that the immigrant workers that were coming there, you know, had a hell of a time, you know, getting medical care. But because we weren't galvanized around those issues, like they were pretty much left on their own to a certain extent to try solving it if it was ever solved, right? So I think we do need to have like a national discussion about what our common interests are and our common issues are, and then educate our community members. So when that knock comes on the door, yes, you can have your individual issues about, you know, within your specific region, right, and your specific area that your politician can address, but also what they're going back to what Sarah mentioned, knowing what collectively, if you have interest with the migrant workers, immigrants, immigrant students, they have many different issues as well. Then you can ask some different questions that relate to federal, provincial, as well as municipal governments and how they can address those other issues that you're interested in. But if you're not knowledgeable about what the federal government can do and what the provincial government can do, then you'll be asking that politician the wrong question because they can't answer that question. They can't, and they'll have nothing to be able to address that. You know, so we just definitely need to educate ourselves on the different elements of government as well as the issues, and also galvanizing ourselves to be able to voice these issues and address them.
Elle Jones.
Well, first of all, if you live in some kind of like super Black building in a super Black neighborhood, I challenge I want to see documents of like white candidates coming to your door, you know, is what I'm saying. Like, I don't know that white candidates be traipsing through like the super hood or whatever you want to call it. So yeah, I mean, first of all, do the candidates come to our doors? I think a lot of buildings they skip, especially if they think it's like, you know, people don't speak English in that building or it's scary. But I think it's also really important. I think anybody can, like, I guess to sort of take the question in a different direction, I think sometimes our people are convinced that they don't know enough to ask things. Like, I don't think we always realize that, like, the amount of shit that white people don't know. You know, like one time I was doing a presentation to judges and I like asked them how many Black communities were in Nova Scotia and they thought there was like 6. And I'm like, you're judges. You don't know that. Like, I can't come in front of you. I'm like checking what I'm saying with a ton of lawyers so that I don't make one tiny mistake and you dismiss me. But you think there's 6 Black communities when there's like 50, you know, like, so we often think like white people must know these things and that we need this kind of education and we don't advocate for ourselves. So like Fatuma, Abdul's sister, like when she stood up to Trudeau, ever since then, she's all about confronting politicians because she found her power there and she knows she can. And she's always like, I'm going to go in front of like Trudeau. If he comes near me, I'm going to tell him about like people on deportation orders. And she's not, like, she's an ordinary Black woman that's lived a really terrible life because of oppression, but she has her voice. So I think it's also really important that there's no special degree or special magic or special knowledge. Like, Black people have great instincts. Black people don't necessarily know something to know something. Like, you know, we just have our finger on thing, no matter how much education you have or don't have or whatever. Whatever. Like, Black people just know, like we have an understanding of racism in our bones. There's nothing any of us can tell the person cleaning toilets at the hospital about what systemic oppression looks like. They know. So it's also like we need to trust ourselves and know that like we have a legitimate voice, because I think often we have this like low self-esteem around that. And then the last thing I would say there is in response to, yeah, do we need a collective voice? I mean, it's difficult because as Warren's been talking about, what we call collectives is often very class, right? It actually means the educated classes who are speaking on behalf of all of us. And we all do that. Like, we're doing that right now, you know? But yeah, I mean, there's a good read that, you know, we've become social workers in a lot of ways, which is important because our community's in crisis. So we respond to crisis, but we never build political power. And then every election it's played out that we have no real political organ. Rocky was talking about this, like Rocky Jones in the 70s. That's why they were trying to form Black United Front, so that we actually had a way of channeling, because the reason why they don't pay attention to us is like we don't have the Council of Chiefs. We don't have these things where you at least have to go to. So they don't have to come to your building. Like, who cares if they come to your building or not, you know? So yeah, I think we've never really been able to develop in Canada like a Black collective voice. And part of that is, of course, as Warren said, because we're not one Black community. We're refugees, we're immigrants, we're super middle class, we have like super wealthy people, we have conservative people, we have a whole range, and we don't agree. And like, let's not leave out misogynoir, let's not leave out all these things, homophobia that, you know, impact us as a community. But until we get that kind of voice, however that is and how we organize, like, they don't, you know, they'll throw us a little bit, but we're not a huge voting bloc. We're not like seniors or something. So yeah, I'll leave it there. I think that's all I have to say. But.
Okay, well, unless anyone else has anything to add, I think I'm going to shut it down there for now. Go ahead, Sarah. You are on. Oh, go. There we go.
Yes. Please make sure that you go to elections.ca and make sure you are registered. Okay. Because, you know, the number of people who, you know, they show up on the day only to realize, oh my God, I'm not registered. And especially people who are not eligible to vote last time, but are now eligible to vote this time, please go to elections.ca. And by the way, on that website, you're going to have all the information that you need on the different ways you can vote, what all the deadlines are, where your riding is, and all the candidates running in your riding, so that you can research them for yourself to find out, you know, who piques your interest, so that should any of them come to your door, you have a sense of who the hell that is in the first place, right? So.
Robert, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to ask Elle with respect to the Black MLAs. that were elected, were they elected predominantly from like Black communities like North Preston, or was it that, or places where there are pockets of Black people that could sway the vote either way?
So the next neighborhood over to me, that's a Somali man, Ali Duarte. So that's mostly like, there's a Black contingent in that neighborhood because there's like some public housing. Sorry to put it this way, but this is kind of how Halifax works. But no, that's actually probably white people that elected. Very hair's breadth to the NDP. North Preston, yeah, Angela Simmons for the Liberal Party. Tony Ince got reelected, who was formerly the only MLA. He's out in, oh my God, Cole Harbour, Dartmouth, Cole Harbour.
Yeah, Cole Harbour, yeah.
And who's the fourth? Sarah, who am I forgetting?
Is it Hanson?
Oh, Susie, of course, Susie Hanson, North End. So that's now a Black City Council, Lindell. That's Lindell's Ward 8. And then also now Black MLA. So that's sort of the one. So yeah, North Preston, and that's where the square is, which is where Africville residents went. So sort of two Black strongholds, one, I guess like normal, I don't know, white middle class, like residential. And then, the other one, Tony has held that seat now for like 3 cycles. So a mix, but yeah.
Okay.
And Susie, the next day, I will say that Susie, the next day was down at the shelters. So like got elected. And then like the next morning at 6 a.m., they were down like defending people's shelters on the Wednesday while people got pepper sprayed and stuff. So stepped up right away. So, I mean, she's good people. I know Susie really well. We'll see. I mean, I'm always like, we'll see when people get into politics. And one of the things about, I guess, being like my age is like, you start to have friends that are now coming into like power positions. And you're like, you know, I knew you won, like when we were like doing these things, like, are you gonna, you know, like, so it's like a kind of interesting position when you know people, you came up with them and you work to them in all these ways, and then they go off and do these things, and then you have to like side eye them and be like, you know, I love you, but I might have to, you know, we'll see how things go. So that's the other thing. But I mean, that is not undifficult for Black people, right? That we have our personal solidarities, and then it's political, and that's something our community really struggles with, right? That this move from like, I like you, you're my friend, you might be a good person, you might go to church, but you're voting against something, and now I have to come for you. And then it becomes like, how could you do this to me? And it's like, I'm not doing it to you, I'm doing it to your policy. And I consider it my job as an activist to do these things. I don't relish in like making your life miserable. It's not about you, but I have to have the courage to stand up if people in prison are saying like, this is happening. I don't care if you're a Black justice minister or whatever, I have to go for you. So that's also like a huge problem. As we get more people in power, I don't think we've handled the idea that we have powerful Black people, we have Black ministers, we have all kinds of things, and how we deal with that as a community is being very difficult and a source of a lot, as we know, a lot of contention. And this is some of what we're talking about with these class issues and stuff, right? And like, how do we deal with, like, what would we do if we had a Black prime minister? Would we just be like, oh great, we have a Black prime minister, let's all sit down and shut up? Or would we be like, we have to challenge this person? So we also have to really think about what traditional power means and how that fits with some of our other goals. And I know Robert wants to say, I've talked a lot, so Robert, go ahead. You haven't talked as much.
Yeah, no, it's okay. I'm feeding off your energy and everything, right? So, no, but the one thing I would say is that, you know, going to what Elle's talking about, I think we just need to have a thick skin and to realize that our personal affiliations have nothing to do with our political beliefs, right? You know, when Elle and I first got into a discussion with ourselves, like, you know, we had an issue that we had between the two of us, right? And that's how it started, right? And I didn't know her from the beginning, but ever since we fleshed that out and I realized where she was coming from, she realized where I was coming from, and even in slight details we might disagree on certain details, but we know that our collective interests are what bonds the two of us. Right? That, you know, that we have different approaches, but I understand where she's coming from, and we just bond on that particular aspect of it, right? And we've been like texting each other for the last 2 months.
And I like, it's really beautiful, right? Like, Black people can dispute, and then if we come to each other as community and talk, we actually can work things out. Like, we have. And we don't do enough of that too, I think. And I'm guilty of that. You know, I'm totally like hardcore and I'll go for people, you know. And I do think like that is political too, right? That daily, like, did we get on the phone with each other and just be like, yo, what are you saying? Like, what's going on? Not in a managing way, not in the way you sometimes get the call when someone wants to shut up, but in the way of being like, can we talk about this? And yeah, like, that's really great. Warren, go ahead.
You're on mute, Warren.
I was just going to add value to what you're saying, Elle, because I'm not sure if you see the comment. I'm not trying to call out the viewer who wrote that, and I'm not trying to do harm at all, but that goes to your point right there, where Dave mentioned, I am from Germany, and I don't support the LGBTQ DXWQPY plus movement, right? Like, we don't even consider a solidarity based on sexuality. We don't. Like, the first and foremost thing, we got to consider what Blackness really means in our community. And I can tell you this right now, it's not uniform. Not everyone in our community considers themselves Black. That's the first thing. This thing is so political, we put it on people. We don't even understand how we are trying to change people's lives through this colonial narrative by telling them that they are Black. There are people pushing against this narrative if you're actually listening. And then on top of that, when you start using different intersections that either complement, use word loosely here, it then heightens the degree of separations that we really have within our community. We have a lot of work that we're not ready to have. And, I trust that this was an opportunity for us to get really critically engaged today and push that envelope, because I'm going to tell the three of you, if I come on here the next time, that's where I'm coming from. It's not to come at you. It's not to say you're a bad person. I'm allowed to disagree with your politics and then still say I love you as my brother or sister.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't understand that, and next time I come on here and I bring some fire, if you think it's fire, then hey, get burned, because it's not meant to burn you. It's meant to critically engage with you. So I'll leave it there.
Robert Small.
Yeah, I agree with Warren, and I think everybody else agrees with him too. And the one thing I would say, if you're in this working in the Black community, expecting like an easy ride, you're in the wrong business. Just leave if you are going to take things personally. Okay, like I'm doing a poster for Black kids and I get criticized, right? So. You're going to get criticized no matter what you do. So if you have a thin skin and you get, you feel, oh, you're coming after me, I thought you were my friend and stuff like that. Like, goddamn, the bottom line is, like I always say that I need between 15 to 20% of people that don't like what I'm doing, right? And that hate it, and expect like 85% to appreciate it. Right? Because you need people to say things to you against what you're doing, because there's certain ways that you might be doing something wrong, that you can't have a blind side thinking that you're doing everything right. So you should expect criticism and welcome it, because we need Black leaders who are strong, not the ones that are weak and that are going to crumble when you just mentioned something to them and they start getting their feelings all up into it, right?
I'm going to ask one quick short question. Want a short answer? It's Ryan asked a question here. Should a plan for the Black community should be a primary platform item? So should every political party have a plan for the Black community? Do you feel that they should have that? Go ahead, Sarah.
That's a very difficult thing, because just like somebody mentioned, the Black community is not uniform. Different parts of the community have different priorities, different needs, etc., etc. And a lot of the things that the Black community are looking for, all other Canadians are looking for. All other groups or ethnic minorities, or whatever you want to call it, are looking for. Affordable housing. We all want that, right? We want, fairness in terms of how we're treated in the immigration system. There are many other communities who want that same thing. We want to stop being, harassed by the federal police, the RCMP. There are other communities that want that too. So I don't think that there should be, sort of a subsection of each platform that says the Black community. But all the parties should at least have signed up and committed themselves to the objectives of the UN Decade for Peoples of African Descent. And in there, you're going to find, key components of an agenda to fully support the full participation of Canada's Afro-descendant citizens in Canadian society at all levels. So already, if you start there and you commit fully to adhering to those objectives, I might look at you twice, even if you're not a party that I tend not to vote for. I might look at you. But in terms of a Black platform, I don't no, I don't see that.
Anyone else want to chime in on that before we close it down today? Go ahead, Warren, unmute yourself.
Oh, no, I was just saying I'm okay. Thank you.
Okay, no problem. Everyone else good? All right. Well, look, thank you for the smartest people I know and for the smartest people I feel in this country for making this an epic conversation. We basically stood on one conversation topic for the whole thing. So we'll have to wait for other time for other stuff. I'd like to say thank you to each one of you for taking the time to make us better today. So first things first, want to give everyone an opportunity to say where people can contact you. So first want to go to Elle Jones. How can people reach you?
Mostly just over email, el.jones@msvu.ca. My Facebook's full up. Ain't on Twitter because I'm scared of it. And yeah, but you can also send me an email. And like Robert said, it's really important that we also talk. So if there's anything I say that you're just like, what? Or that was messed up, or I don't like when you do this, you should tell me about it, so we should always have those conversations in community as well.
Thank you, Ella, and hope, again, you and everyone there stay safe, not only with what's going on at ground level, but with the hurricane too. Next up, Sarah.
Black on Black 891 at hotmail.com. The show airs every Saturday from 11 a.m. to noon Eastern on CHUO 89.1 FM in Ottawa.
Thank you very much. Next up, Warren Clarke.
You can reach me at warrenclarke.ca. See, it's a simple and easiest way to reach me. I echo what Elle said. If you need to challenge me, ask me questions, clarify, or say, hey, Warren, these are my views, and please, I accept that, because what the hell do I know? I'm just a guy with an opinion. So, talk to people soon. Take care. Be safe.
Smart guy with an opinion, by the way. And last but not least, Robert Small.
Yeah, well, people can reach me at rsmall@thelegacyposter.com, and I'll continue what everyone has mentioned, that if anyone has any issue with anything that I said, forget you, I'm going for it anyway. No, I'm only joking. Feel free to email me and everything like that. And criticisms always make us all better, right? And if we're professing ourselves as that we're somehow leading the Black community, which I wouldn't say that I am, right? But if it's in doubt upon us, we need to respond. So rsmall@thelegacyposter.com, and get my poster, the www.thelegacyposter.com, so you can go there and check them out.
Thank you very much. Dr. Vibe here. Best place to reach me is via my website, thedrvibeshow.com. As always, note that I am the 2020 Best Podcast Award winner, and also 2018 Innovation Award winner given out by the Canadian Ethnic Media Association. Hosts the only online show in the world for dads and fathers that is sponsored by Dove Men Care, and also that Central Canada's National Fatherhood Organization. And I am the board chair for the Global Food and Drink Initiative, a multimedia not-for-profit that showcases Blacks in the diaspora. They're doing their thing in food, wine, and travel. Like to close out as always with this: live your life as a dream. If you can dream it, you can make it. Sometimes you have to get small to get stronger. Block assumptions and aim bigger, aim better, aim higher, aim wider. Love, faith, and respect. And remember to give yourself grace. I'd like to thank everyone who watched this live or will watch it replay-wise or listen to it replay-wise. And thank you to BIA Media for the great production today. God bless. Peace to all. Keep the faith and walk good.